ambient traffic noise this time, hopefully. And excuse me for capturing that exchange. Oh, Robbie's a good guy. I'm not talking about me. For those of you that might think that my name is Robbie, that's kind of an inside joke. But Isaiah chapter 14 is the scripture portion of God Our Live today. So let us begin. King James Version, as is my wont. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land. And strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. As I'm not a clergyman, I have no professional education in theology, let alone Christianity. A lot of this is unknown material to me. I did peruse the content, if you want to call it that. The significance of the house of Jacob is what I'm rambling around to. Something I should probably look into on my own time. And the strangers shall be joined with them. The Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land. And that's a prophecy that, well, has come true. Does not Israel have its own land now? They were previously a nomadic nation. Just kind of an oxymoron in its own. And the strangers shall be joined with them. At first glance, that makes me think of the Christians, the non-Jewish people that get their salvation through Christ, not being Jewish, not being God's chosen people of Israel. And they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. They shall stick with the house of Jacob. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. It might be proper for me to continue with the little disclaimer there, is that I don't have any authority to say that any of this is anything more than my own interpretation as I read the word and think about it and discuss it out loud. Good morning, y'all. Michelle, Shamit. But it looks to me like he's talking about the captured people of probably the first Babylonian captivity, which is a significant point in the Bible. But let's continue on and not dwell over all of that for the time being. Verse 3, and it shall come to pass in the day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear and from the hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve, that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon, and say, how hath the oppressor ceased? The golden city ceased. The Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he that ruled the nations in anger, is persecuted, and none hindereth. The king of Babylon shall be brought down, brought low, and the people that he was oppressing will rule over him. This is a prophecy that, if you look in the history, relate this to the timeline, and this is, again, as we just talked about earlier, around 700 BC, give or take a century, and you see that a lot of this prophecy did indeed unfold. But it isn't just a chronology or history book. It's the Bible. It also talks about today. And I've noticed a trend in prophecy in that they often repeat themselves. Which gives rise to false prophets. If you just repeat someone else's prophecy, noticing the trend of prophecies re-fulfilling themselves, then you could say, I'm a prophet that this will happen, just by looking at the history of prophecy repeating. So the only true prophet would be the one that called it to start with, i.e. Isaiah. It's not to say he's the only prophet, but let's continue on. Verse 7, the whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Yea, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since thou art laid down, no feller is come against us. And no, I don't think somebody from Alabama wrote the book and meant no feller, as we would use the term around here, meaning fellow in Alabama jargon or southern jargon, but rather nobody that chops down trees. A tree feller. To fell a tree is to chop a tree down. Or cut it down in some form. Yea, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, since thou art laid down. Nobody's come to chop us down. So, I don't know. I find it humorously endearing, just a little bit. Continuing on, verse 9. Hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. All they shall speak and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy viols. The worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. Now, hell is moved to meet thee, being these people, or the people that he's sending this message to, which I guess could mean me and you as well. And art thou also become weak as we? These are kings speaking that were kings of nations, but now reside in hell. And then they ask, what are you doing here? Art thou also become weak as us kings? There's some kind of humor in there too, or irony, I suppose would be a more appropriate term. Thy pomp, it's pomp, if you look at the British royalty, all the decorum that they bring, all the pomp. Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy viols, which I know I got a strong southern accent, but viols are a kind of musical instrument. The noise of thy viols. It's interesting that the translation into English did not mean the music of thy viols, but the noise of thy viols. So that's a bit of a philosophical question there. All music is noise, but not all noise is music. Would that be accurate? Perhaps. And the worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. And it sounds to me like that's basically like everybody's going to go, everybody dies, is kind of the gist there. Kings, great and small, peasants, slaves, whatever, lower class, upper class, royalty, commoner, everybody's destined for the ground, for the worms. Verse 12, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. There's something very significant about the north, because we're going to see it referenced again shortly. From what I've heard, Rick, something like that, but not just Texas, but that many states are primarily of non-Christian religion. Now, I don't know that Texas was ever Catholic primarily. I would think that they were probably Protestants. I dated a girl from Texas who, to my surprise, turned out to be Mormon. And that's actually what kind of made us incompatible with each other. But we're not going to talk about lost love, at least not at this portion. Let's get through this chapter first. As we're directing or discussing Satan at the moment, now, is this God speaking or Isaiah speaking on behalf of God? That's one for the Bible historians and pastors and priests of the world. To me, it just sounds like Isaiah, the man, not necessarily the prophet. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? You had a great thing, but you wanted a greater thing. And as such, you lost it. But to quote the scripture, like I already did, I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. And that was Satan's downfall, of course. Uh, Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit, to the sides of the pit, not to the bottom of the pit. And if we reference some other portions of the Bible, that pit doesn't have a bottom. So if you're in a pit with no bottom, stands to reason you're on the side of the pit or suspended in midair. In any case, verse 16. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, Is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness, and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of his prisoners? All the kings of the nations, even all of them, lie in glory, every one in his own house. But thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch, and as the raiment of those that are slain, thrust through with the sword, that go down to the stones of the pit, as a carcass trodden under feet. And I'm trying to approximate the pronunciations and such as best I can. Carcass, Carcase is how it is written here, where we would normally say carcass. But that's splitting hairs, I suppose. Thou shalt not be joined with them in burial, because thou hast destroyed thy land and slain thy people. The seed of evildoers shall never be renowned. Prepare slaughter for his children for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise, nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. For I will rise up against them, saith the Lord of hosts, and cut off Babylon the name, and remnant, and son, and nephew, saith the Lord. I will also make it a possession for the bittern and pools of water, and I will sweep it with the besom of destruction, saith the Lord of hosts. Now, I know that this sounds dry, and I say this just about every God Hour Live, because the King James Version is dry. And that's probably why so many of us hated church when we were kids, hearing the pastor talk about all these difficult, overworded phrases put us to sleep as kids, for which we would be rudely awakened, sometimes even called out in front of the congregation. Even our parents would be shamed. And that's another problem I have with some churches. Some churches, they're not like that, but the one I was in, I remember very specifically the pastor calling my parents out in front of this big congregation because I had fallen asleep. Some of the other kids I'm sure did too, but made an example of them, humiliated my parents. But this stuff will put you to sleep. It's just something about the language of the time. It wasn't for young ears to comprehend. You're 8, 9, 10 years old. This kind of language isn't, even at 40 something like I am, it's not easy to comprehend. but it was like a foreign language to a young kid. But I digress. Um, we don't have much more to go in this chapter here. Verse 24 talks about Assyria. The Lord of hosts hath sworn, saying, Surely as I have thought, so shall it come to pass, and as I have purposed, so shall it stand, that I will break the Assyrian in my land, and upon my mountains tread him under foot. Then shall his yoke depart from off them, and his burden depart from off their shoulders. This is the purpose that is purposed upon the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out upon all the nations. For the Lord of hosts hath purposed, and who shall disannul it? And his hand is stretched out, and who shall turn it back? I mean, this is my second time reading through this chapter just this morning. And even still, it's difficult. The overuse, it seems to be the redundancy of the word purpose here. This is the purpose that is purposed upon the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out upon all the nations. For the Lord of hosts hath purposed, and who shall disannul it? And his hand is stretched out, and who shall turn it back? It's just, it beckons you to go to sleep. But that's why the Bible is not a novel. It's not meant to be gripping, entertaining stuff. A lot of it is, but it doesn't follow a fictional arc. It's, protagonists and all that stuff. Although they have tried to make novelized versions of the Bible, which I consider somewhat blasphemous. In any case, the last little section here of chapter 14. Palestina. In the year that King Ahaz died was this burden. Rejoice not, thou whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root, shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent. Which is interesting because yet again, we see reference to two mythological creatures, cockatrice and fiery flying serpent. I don't think it takes this huge stretch of the imagination to say that's a dragon. And the firstborn of the poor shall feed, and the needy shall lie down in safety. And I will kill thy root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant. Now that's interesting. I will kill thy root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant. It's tricky stuff because the pronouns don't work the way that you would expect them to. And I hesitate to give my own opinion on who I and he are here, but perhaps they are God and Jesus. Because this is, 700 years before Christ. But very last little bit here, 2 verses. Howl, O gate, cry, O city, thou whole Palestina art dissolved. For there shall come from the north, there we go, there's that reference to the north again. There shall come from the north a smoke, and none shall be alone in his appointed times. What shall one then answer the messengers of the nation? That the Lord hath founded Zion, and the poor of his people shall trust in it. All right. I'm not going to pretend to really understand or even to vaguely understand this chapter. And as I said, I've read through it twice. And this is one of those things where a study Bible would probably be would be a helpful thing to have, definitely. I mean, we always have the tools of discernment and prayer. But those are personal tools. You know, you've got access to them just as well as I do, I guess is one way of putting that. A study Bible may not be the answer, because it may be biased study. It's hard to trust anything you read or see. But when it comes to scripture, it's a little bit different, because all scripture is, deviated from its original message. In any case, I'm sorry for the dry scripturing, but I'm not apologizing for the words of the Bible. I apologize for not being able to relay it in a intriguing manner or entertaining manner, if you will. There's a word I'm searching for, but I can't find it. Captivating manner, perhaps. Anyway, advice for life from me. Don't do the things that I've done. There you go. There's some advice. But no, seriously. Advice. Take pride in what you do. And by do, I mean your job, work. And when you work hard at it, get there on time. Serve the Lord through your job. If that's the only way you can serve the Lord, it's certainly a good way to serve Him. The Lord may not sign your paychecks, but the person that doesn't have to be your boss. And that's how I find happiness, comfort, purpose, meaningfulness in what is basically a corporate job. Don't make a lot of money, don't make a lot of crazy great benefits, but I enjoy my job. I enjoy getting to serve others. The eye roll is kind of an inside joke. If you happen to work for the same corporation, you know what I mean. But every day I get to bump into the same people, and every day I get to bump into new people and exchange little bits of, whether it be trivia, advice, gossip even, just chit chat. Like today, I'm obviously not at work at the moment, but today, sadly, I learned that one of my customers passed away April 19th from a heart attack. So that was kind of a sad way to start my morning, but God rest Mr. Dale's soul. I'm sure that from everything I knew about the man, he was a good-hearted man, definitely. Very kind. Never anything bad to say about anybody. So we're gonna miss Mr. Dale. In fact, I think I may swing by his grave before I go to work. And that's kind of a bittersweet thing about the job too, is working in this retail atmosphere, is I do see a lot of my customers pass away. Sometimes slowly, sometimes just suddenly hear about them dying in accidents. But it is what it is. Hi, everybody else. How's everybody else doing today? Is there any happy news? Anybody getting married, having a baby, or I don't know, starting a new job? I'm reluctant to pick up on chapter 15 of the scripture, but we've got a little time to kill, so to speak. The got our short is posted, of course. You may notice I'm not wearing a hat today. It's very unusual for me, but the hair has gotten too long for the hat. It's turned into wings. So I think I'm gonna go get that cut before work. And I also need to call the old barber shop before I go, make sure they are open, yada 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 yada. Now that we've given God an hour or so, I don't know, there's no hurry. Still got 4 hours until work. Thinking about taking the day off, actually, and getting some work done around the home. That sounds pretty good. But only if I can have my shift covered. So I realized that I'm derailed and just got into thinking out loud about what I'm going to do. But if there's nothing more in the chat, now, Rick, if you're still with us here, you're asking about the decline of Catholicism in Texas and the rise of Hindi and Muslim culture. That hasn't happened in Alabama yet, as far as I know. At least certainly not in rural Alabama like I am. But as for the big cities, Montgomery, I don't think there's a big non-Christian upswing, if you will. There is, a few little what is it? You know, there's a Jewish temple or synagogue or whatever, but I can't say that I've seen any kind of like Muslim uh, places of worship. Uh, I only know of really one Catholic church in Montgomery. There's probably more than that. Surely there's more than that, but of the style you think of when you think of a Catholic church with the almost medieval architecture, I can only think of one of those. Uh, but that's not to say we don't have Indian and Mideastern people around here. We've got a few. In fact, I'm pretty good friends with, well, you know, business friends, I guess you'd say, with the guy that runs a shop. I believe he's from Syria or something. He's a good guy, as far as I can tell. And he's friendly, he doesn't mind going out of his way to get special requests, you know. Doesn't seem to harbor any kind of inherent hatred for Americans or any of the stereotypes you hear about these people. I used to work for a pair of Muslim brothers, like actual brothers, and they were great people. They were kind, they were fun to be around, you know, fun to work for. They had good ethics when it comes to business. They did not cheat any customers, and we were taught not to cheat them either. If a customer came and asked for, you know, an expensive job to be done, if it was not practical, we would make sure the customer knew there are cheaper ways to spend your money and get better results. Although we didn't use the word cheap. There are more cost-effective, more value, and so on. Jim, I'm a bit intrigued by that question earlier. Advice for life. Because I'd love to have advice for life too. But maybe I am reaching an age where I'm qualified to give a little bit of advice. I am in my 40s after all, and it dawned on me the other day that I don't have anyone left that's alive to ask questions about the past. Now people are asking me about the past. Like when 9/11 happened, like when the Challenger blew up. So I remember those events, specifically 9/11 and the Challenger, but that was more of a, you know, I was a young kid at that point. I didn't understand the magnitude of what had just happened. It's terrifying, though. Much like the terrifying ordeal of 9/11, but that one was surreal in that I was already legally an adult and watching what had been a fixture my entire life. The two towers fall into the ground, live TV. That was freaking. It's one to tell the next generation about, because it's like the Kennedy thing that I did not witness. I was not born yet, but now I kind of understand how the people that did witness the Kennedy assassination felt. Uh, Something you didn't think could happen or would ever happen in your life does. And you realize just how fleeting life is and how uncertain tomorrow is, or today for that matter. But I think we're going to wrap things up. I appreciate everybody that stopped by. I'm going to go get this mop taken care of and get ready for work. We'll continue with Isaiah 15 tomorrow. Definitely off tomorrow if I can't get today off. With that, that's God Hour Live for the 28th. I appreciate everybody, as I say. God bless you all. Have a great day. And may the Lord bless and keep you. See you soon. Rick, you are still there. I got you. Dang. Oh, I don't doubt it. But it's not just Texas, right? I mean, Minnesota and Maine, from what I understand, are also having immigrant explosions. I kind of don't want to use that word. Booming rise of immigrants from those religions. Notice the emphasis is on the religions, not the countries they come from. Because this is a nation formed under God. Hinduism is a very different religion than any of the Abrahamics, but Islam is the one I'm most wary of. Because I don't know, I can't be too critical, certainly of a religion I'm not a part of. I feel a lot more comfortable being critical of Christianity because I'm a Christian, and you know, other faiths have to find their own comfort and look at themselves to see what they're doing wrong. It's not for me to judge a different religion. And anyway, that's going to be God Hour Live. Y'all have a good day. God bless you. See you soon. I think they're starting to wonder why I'm loitering in this parking lot so long. Yeah, you're right, Rick. My blood is 250 years old, at least. I mean, I'm gonna get technical. We're all made of stardust. In any case, I got to get going about my day, y'all. I appreciate it. I'll be seeing you soon. Thank you for coming out, tuning in, whatever. Be seeing you.